The deep hum of the Horizon's engines filled the bridge as Captain Susan Harris studied the strange signal on her screen. She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear and frowned. The ship wasn't supposed to change course for another 3 weeks, but this signal was unlike anything she had seen before. "Frank, analyze this pattern again," she said to her science officer. Frank Miller looked up from his station, dark circles under his eyes after 16 hours on duty. "Captain, I've run it through every known database. It's definitely artificial but doesn't match any known species communication patterns." Susan nodded slowly. The signal pulsed with an odd crystalline quality, almost musical but with mathematical precision. "And you're certain about the origin?" "Yes, Captain. System HD 9472, not on any trade routes, no reported colonies." Frank hesitated. "The star is showing signs of instability." Susan felt a familiar tug in her gut, the kind that had gotten her both promotions and reprimands throughout her career. Earth Command had strict rules about unauthorized detours, especially this far from home space. "How far off our course?" she asked. 3 days at standard speed," replied Kate Mendez from the navigation console. "But we'd have to file a flight plan change with command." Susan stood and walked to the viewport. Stars stretched endlessly before her, cold and beautiful. Somewhere out there, someone or something was sending a message into the void. "Plot the course, Kate. I'll handle command." 2 hours later, after a heated exchange with her superiors, Susan addressed the crew. 134 men and women gathered in the ship's common area, curious about their sudden change in direction. "We've detected a distress signal," Susan explained. "Unknown origin, but definitely intelligent. Command has reluctantly authorized us to investigate, but they've made it clear this is our responsibility alone." Chief Engineer Joe Baker raised his hand. "Any idea what we're flying into, Captain?" "None," Susan admitted. "But that signal has all the markers of a civilization in trouble. If there's even a small chance we can help, I believe we should try." 3 days later, the Horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the HD 9472 system. What they saw left the bridge crew speechless. The star pulsed an angry red, much more unstable than their scans had suggested. The third planet, clearly the source of the signal, was already showing signs of atmospheric degradation. Massive solar flares lashed out periodically, and one side of the planet glowed with unhealthy heat. "Life signs?" Susan asked quietly. Frank worked his console rapidly. "Billions," he replied with disbelief. "But not carbon-based. The readings are unlike anything in our database." "They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies now," Kate reported. "I think they've detected us." "Open a channel," Susan ordered. "Standard greeting package, all languages." The main screen flickered, and Susan prepared herself for first contact. What appeared made several crew members step back in surprise. The being on screen had an insect-like appearance with a translucent exoskeleton that caught the light in rainbow patterns. Multiple limbs moved with precise, delicate motions, but most striking were the crystalline growths that seemed to be part of its body, glowing from within. "I am Kirtal," the being said, its voice translated through the ship's computers with an odd musical quality. "Speaker for the Vesperi Collective. You have answered our call when others would not." Susan stepped forward. "I'm Captain Susan Harris, of the Earth vessel Horizon. We received your distress signal. How can we help?" The alien's crystalline structures pulsed. "Our star dies, Captain. We have perhaps one planetary cycle before our world becomes uninhabitable. We seek assistance with evacuation." "One planetary cycle?" Frank whispered. "That's about 14 Earth months." Susan nodded slightly. "You mentioned others not answering your call. 7 spacefaring civilizations have received our broadcasts. All declined to intervene." The crystal structures dimmed slightly. "They cited incompatibility concerns. Our biology is different." Susan noticed how the light played through the alien's partially transparent body. Crystal formations seemed integrated with organic tissue in ways she couldn't begin to understand. "May we send a team to your world to better understand your needs?" she asked. You would come to our surface? Kirtal seemed surprised. The radiation levels are already dangerous for most species. We have protective gear, Susan replied, and we need to understand exactly what help you require. 24 hours later, Susan led a team of 5 specialists to the Vesperi homeworld. Even through their protective suits, they could feel the planet's dying heat. The landscape was alien, but beautiful. Crystal formations grew alongside organic structures in a harmony of biology and mineral. The Vesperi city was a wonder of engineering. Massive crystal spires channeled light and energy, while protective domes shielded the inhabitants from the increasingly hostile atmosphere. Kirtal met them in a chamber designed to accommodate visitors. Few have walked on our world, the alien said. You show unusual courage. Or unusual foolishness, Susan replied with a small smile, but we wanted to see for ourselves. The Vesperi showed them records of their communications with other species. The Tellurians, an advanced race with vast resources, had explicitly stated, "Your crystalline neural networks are incompatible with our life support systems. Adaptation would require resources we cannot justify." Similar responses came from all the others. "How many Vesperi need evacuation?" asked Dr. Peter West, the team's xenobiologist. 8 billion, replied Kirtal. The humans exchanged glances. Earth's entire fleet couldn't manage a fraction of that number. "And your technology?" asked Joe Baker. "Could your people build evacuation ships with the right materials?" "We have the knowledge," Kirtal confirmed, "but not the time or resources. Our star's degradation accelerates." As if to emphasize the point, the ground trembled slightly. Through the transparent ceiling, they watched as another solar flare lashed the upper atmosphere, causing the protective shields to flicker. Later, back on the horizon, the team shared their findings with the rest of the crew. "Their biology is crystal-based," Peter explained. "They absorb and process radiation in ways we've never seen before. Their neural networks are partially crystalline, allowing for unique forms of communication and computation. Can we help them?" Susan asked directly. "Not alone," Joe admitted. "But if Earth committed resources, if we adapted our colony ship designs." 8 billion people, Kate whispered. "We've never attempted anything like this." Susan looked at the image of the dying planet on the main screen. "Open a channel to Earth Command," she said firmly. "Priority 1. When Commander Bill Ryan's face appeared, he already looked displeased. "Captain Harris, your detour was authorized for investigation only." "With respect, Commander, we've found an intelligent species facing extinction. They've reached out to 7 other civilizations for help and all refused." "There may be good reasons for that, Captain." Susan leaned forward. "Their star is dying. They have technology, culture, knowledge unlike anything we've encountered. And they will all die unless someone helps them, and you believe that should be us? Humanity hasn't even been part of the galactic community for 50 years. We're still establishing ourselves." "Maybe this is exactly how we should establish ourselves," Susan replied. "By showing we're different, that we won't turn away when it's difficult." She sent the data they had collected. "Review this, sir. See what I've seen. Then tell me we should just fly away and let billions die." The bridge fell quiet as they waited for the commander's response. Finally, he sighed. "I'll take this to the council. No promises, Harris." "Thank you, sir." Susan turned to her crew after the transmission ended. "Now we wait." Frank approached her quietly when the others had returned to their duties. "You know what you're asking, right? The resources, the political complications." Susan looked out at the Vesperi homeworld, its beauty still visible despite the dying star's angry glow. "I know exactly what I'm asking, Frank, but I also know what I'd be doing if I flew away." She straightened her uniform. "Sometimes being human means doing the hard thing because it's the right thing." Outside, another solar flare lashed across space, a stark reminder that for the Vesperi, time was running out. 3 weeks later, Susan stood before the Earth Council in the great glass dome of the Geneva complex. Sunlight streamed through the transparent ceiling, casting long shadows across the floor. 50 representatives from Earth's United Nations sat in tiered seats, their faces serious as they reviewed the data from the Horizons encounter. "Captain Harris," began Counselor Alan Wright, "your report indicates that this species, the Vesperi, requires conditions that are fundamentally Different from our own. Yes, sir, Susan replied. Their biology is crystal-based rather than carbon-based. They process radiation differently than we do. And 7 other spacefaring civilizations have already declined to help them? Asked a woman with silver hair. That's correct, Counselor Chen. The Tellurians specifically cited biological incompatibility as their reason for refusing. Murmurs filled the chamber. The Tellurians were known for their advanced technology and considerable resources. If they deemed a rescue impossible, 8 billion lives, said Alan Wright quietly. Captain Harris, I sympathize with your concern, but the logistics alone would be staggering. We would need to build specialized habitats, develop new life, support systems. With all due respect, Counselor, Susan interrupted, we've done the impossible before. When acid rain threatened our crops 2 centuries ago, we developed atmospheric scrubbers. When sea levels rose, we built floating cities. Humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to adapt. The council chamber grew quiet. Susan took a deep breath and continued. The Vesperi have technology and knowledge that could benefit us tremendously. Their crystal computing systems are far beyond our own. But more importantly, they are a sentient species facing extinction. If we turn our backs on them now, what does that say about us? After 3 days of heated debate, the council voted. By a narrow margin, they approved what would be called Project Exodus, humanity's first large-scale alien rescue mission. Dr. Olivia Mason stood in her lab, surrounded by holographic displays of Vesperi physiology. At 42, she was Earth's leading expert on non-carbon-based life forms. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she hadn't slept properly in days. The crystal structures in their neural pathways require specific radiation frequencies, she explained to the team of engineers and biologists gathered around her. Standard human habitats would be like darkness to them. They wouldn't just be uncomfortable, they would slowly die. So we need to redesign our entire life support system, said Greg Foster, the lead engineer. His face showed the strain of the challenge before them. Not just that, Olivia replied. We need to replicate the specific conditions of their homeworld. Their bodies absorb radiation that would kill us, but they need it to survive. Can we even do that? Asked a young biologist. We have to try, Olivia said simply. Captain Harris has bought us time by convincing the council. Now we need to prove it wasn't wasted. For the next 2 months, Olivia's team worked around the clock. They studied the data from the horizon and communicated daily with Vesperi scientists. Slowly, a solution began to take shape. Layered habitats, Greg suggested during one late-night session. The outer shell blocks harmful radiation for the human crews, while the inner chambers concentrate the specific frequencies the Vesperi need. And separate atmospheric systems, added Olivia. Their air would poison us, and ours would be insufficient for them. Meanwhile, at the lunar shipyards, Earth's largest vessels were being retrofitted for the mission. The colony ships originally meant to expand human presence in the galaxy were repurposed to save another species entirely. Not everyone supported the effort. Protesters gathered outside the Geneva complex, holding signs that read, Earth first, and save our own. Alan Wright faced these critics in a global broadcast. I understand the concerns, he said, standing tall despite the pressure. These resources could help many human colonies. But I ask you to consider this. When humanity was young, we often ignored the suffering of those who seemed different from us. We've grown beyond that narrow thinking on Earth. Now we have the chance to prove we've truly evolved as a species. At the Vesperi homeworld, conditions were deteriorating faster than predicted. The horizon remained in orbit, maintaining communication and coordinating with Vesperi leaders. Susan sent regular updates to Earth. Solar activity has increased by 30%, she reported grimly. The Vesperi have evacuated their southern continent entirely. Their orbital shields are failing. We need to move faster. Olivia received this news while testing a prototype habitat module. She turned to her team, determination in her eyes. We don't have the luxury of perfect solutions anymore. We need working solutions now. In orbit around Mars, the first completed rescue vessel underwent final testing. The Salvation, nearly 2 kilometers long, represented the largest single construction project in human history. Its unique design featured massive crystalline chambers where the Vesperi could live safely during the journey to their new home. Greg Foster, now the ship's chief engineer, guided a group of Tellurian observers through the vessel. The aliens had arrived unannounced, curious about what the humans had managed to accomplish. This section houses the radiation focus arrays, Greg explained, pointing to huge mechanisms that lined the inner hull. They'll collect specific frequencies from nearby stars and channel them into the Vesperi living areas. Remarkable, said the Tellurian representative, her translator converting her musical language. We calculated that such systems would require resources beyond reasonable allocation. Greg smiled thinly. We didn't calculate whether it was reasonable. We just did it. Back on Earth, the council met again to review the progress. 6 months had passed since Susan's first report, and the situation on the Vesperi homeworld had become desperate. The first 10 ships will be ready within weeks, Alan reported, but they can only transport about 1 billion Vesperi in total. We'll need more time for the rest. Time they don't have, Susan replied from the view screen. Her face looked thin and tired after months in orbit around the dying world. The Vesperi scientists estimate their planetary shields will fail completely within 4 months. The room fell silent as the reality settled over them. Even with humanity's best efforts, they might not save everyone. Then we focus on cultural preservation as well, said Olivia, who had joined the meeting from her lab. We ensure their knowledge, their history, their art survives, even if we can't save every individual. And we keep building ships, Alan added firmly. We don't give up just because the odds are against us. As the meeting ended, a junior aide rushed in with an urgent message. The Arcturans, another advanced species who had previously declined to help the Vesperi, had contacted Earth. They had been monitoring the human efforts with interest. They're offering ships, the aide said breathlessly. Not many, but enough to transport another 100 million Vesperi. Alan looked surprised. Why the change of heart? Their message said only, the humans have shown us a better path. That evening, Susan stood on the observation deck of the horizon, looking down at the Vesperi world. One side now glowed an angry red as the dying sun slowly consumed it. Yet still, the crystal cities sparkled with life and determination. We're coming, she whispered to the planet below. Hold on just a little longer. Commander Eric Johnson stood on the bridge of the Salvation as it exited Earth's orbit. At 45, he had spent most of his life in space, but nothing had prepared him for this mission. The massive ship hummed with energy as its engines powered, up for the long journey ahead. All systems operating within normal parameters, reported his first officer, Linda Reyes. Crystal chambers are stable. Eric nodded. Behind them, 5 more ships followed in tight formation. The first wave of the Vesperi rescue fleet. Each vessel carried specialized equipment and had been retrofitted with the crystal habitats designed by Dr. Olivia Mason's team. Send a message to the fleet, Eric said. Prepare for faster-than-light jump on my mark. The stars blurred as the ships accelerated beyond light speed. The journey to the Vesperi homeworld would take 3 weeks at maximum speed, time that the dying planet might not have. Back on Earth, tensions were growing. The resources dedicated to the Vesperi rescue had been diverted from human colony projects. Some political leaders were calling for the mission to be scaled back. Alan Wright faced an angry crowd at a public forum in New Chicago. How many human lives could be saved with those resources? Shouted one man. Alan waited for the noise to die down before speaking. This isn't a question of either helping others or helping ourselves. Humanity has always been at its best when we reach beyond our immediate needs. He brought up a hologram showing the progress of the mission. Already, the technology developed for this rescue has improved our own life support systems. The Vesperi crystal computing methods are being adapted for human use. We aren't just giving help, we're building a partnership that will benefit both species. Not everyone was convinced, but enough supported the mission for it to continue. On the horizon, still orbiting the Vesperi world, Susan Harris received troubling news from the planet's surface. The northern shield generators have failed completely, reported Kirtal, whose crystal structures had dimmed noticeably in recent weeks. We've moved as many as possible to the southern shelters, but we've lost thousands already. Susan's hands tightened on the edge of her console. Our ships are coming, Kirtal. The first wave should arrive within 5 days. We are grateful, Captain Harris, the Vesperi representative replied. But I must be honest, even with your help, many of my people will not survive. After the transmission ended, Susan turned to Frank, who had remained with her through the months of waiting. Contact Dr. Mason. Tell her we need to adapt the first ships to handle more people than planned, and then get me the fleet commander. When Eric's face appeared on the screen, Susan didn't waste time with formalities. Commander, the situation has deteriorated. You need to push your engines beyond safety protocols. Eric frowned. Captain, we're already at maximum. It won't be enough, Susan cut in. The northern continent is gone, thousands dead already. Eric was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. I'll speak to my engineers. We'll find a way. Throughout the human fleet, crews worked to squeeze more power from their engines. On the Salvation, Chief Engineer Steve Rogers pushed the ship's systems to their limits. We're redlining everything, he told Eric. If we burn out the cooling, systems will be dead in space. And if we arrive too late, we're just witnesses to an extinction, Eric replied. Keep us moving, Chief. The fleet arrived at the Vesperi homeworld 3 days earlier than planned. What they found shocked even the most prepared among them. Half the planet glowed red-hot, the atmosphere burned away by solar flares. The remaining continents were protected by failing shield generators that flickered dangerously with each new burst of radiation. Begin evacuation procedures immediately, Eric ordered. All ships, deploy shuttles and transport craft. The first, human vessels descended through the turbulent atmosphere, fighting against radiation storms that threatened to fry their electronics. On the surface, millions of Vesperi had gathered at designated evacuation points, carrying only what was essential for their survival. Linda Reyes led the first ground team, wearing specialized suits to protect against the alien environment. The sky above them flashed with angry bursts of energy from the dying star. We need to move quickly, she told the Vesperi leader who met them. Each transport can carry 5,000 of your people. The evacuation began as an orderly process, but as shield failures became more frequent, panic spread. During one particularly violent solar storm, a transport got caught on the ground as the local shields failed. Linda and her team rushed to help the stranded Vesperi. We can't get the ship off the ground, the pilot radioed. Engine controls are fried from the radiation. Linda made a quick decision. Evacuate the crew, abandon ship. We'll load these people on the next transport. There's no room, the pilot protested. We're already over capacity on all other vessels. Linda looked at the frightened Vesperi, their crystal structures dimming in the fading light. Then we stay behind with them and wait for the next wave of ships. A young engineer named Lisa Garner stepped forward. I might be able to manually override the engine controls. It would mean staying in the radiation zone. That's too dangerous, Linda began, but Lisa was already moving toward the damaged transport. Just get these people loaded, Lisa called back. I'll worry about the engines. From the Salvation in orbit, Eric watched as multiple shield sections failed across the planet's surface. Massive solar flares reached toward the fragile world like fiery fingers. We're losing ground, he told Susan, who had joined his ship from the horizon. At this rate, we'll only save half their population. Susan refused to accept defeat. The second wave of ships is only days behind us, and the Arcturans will arrive tomorrow. Will that be soon enough? Eric asked quietly. On the planet below, Lisa worked feverishly inside the damaged transport. The radiation levels were rising, and her suit couldn't protect her for much longer. Her hands shook as she rewired the engine controls, bypassing the fried systems. Just a little longer, she whispered to herself. Behind her, the transport bay was packed with Vesperi, their crystal bodies glowing with fear and hope. With a final connection, the engines roared to life. Lisa staggered to the cockpit and collapsed into the pilot's seat. Her vision was blurring from radiation exposure, but she managed to lift the ship off the ground just as another solar flare struck the area they had been in. As the transport limped into orbit, Lisa sent a simple message. Made it. Full load. Of passengers. Request medical assistance. On the Salvation, Eric received the news of Lisa's actions with mixed emotions, pride in her courage, concern for her health. This was the true face of the mission. Individual humans making enormous sacrifices for people they had only just met. This is why we're different, he told his officers during the evening briefing. Not because we're stronger or smarter than the other species, but because we understand that differences don't matter when lives are at stake. As the evacuation continued, news arrived that the Tellurians had reconsidered their position. 3 of their ships were now en route to assist. Perhaps, Kirtal said to Susan, your species has taught the galaxy something important. Susan watched as another shuttle full of Vesperi refugees docked with the Salvation. We're just doing what should have been done from the beginning. Behind them, through the viewport, the Vesperi homeworld burned a little brighter as another shield section failed. 8 months after the first evacuation ships left Earth, the human Vesperi fleet arrived at their destination, a terraformed moon orbiting a stable gas giant in the Tau Ceti system. The journey had been difficult. 17 ships had been damaged during the hasty evacuation, and 3 had been lost entirely when the Vesperi star finally collapsed. Dr. Olivia Mason stood at the viewport of the science vessel Discovery, watching as the first transport ships began their descent to the moon's surface. After months of theoretical work and simulations, the moment of truth had arrived. Would the habitats they had designed actually sustain the Vesperi? Nervous? Asked Greg Foster, who had joined her team after the evacuation. Terrified, Olivia admitted. We've done everything possible to recreate their home conditions, but there are so many variables we couldn't test. The moon, named New Vesperi in official documents but already being called Haven by most humans, had been prepared over the past 8 months by advanced teams. Massive crystal structures reached toward the sky, designed to capture and focus specific radiation frequencies from Tau Ceti. Environmental domes protected areas where humans would work alongside their alien charges. On the bridge of the Salvation, Eric Johnson watched the landing operations through tired eyes. The evacuation had taken its toll on everyone. His crew had worked without proper rest for months, pushing themselves and their ship beyond safe limits. First group of settlers reports successful touchdown, Linda announced from her station. Environmental readings within acceptable parameters. A small cheer went up from the bridge crew. It was their first real victory after so much loss. And how are our special passengers? Eric asked. Linda smiled. The Vesperi Council of Elders has expressed their gratitude. Again, the evacuation had not been able to save all 8 billion Vesperi. In the end, just over 5 billion had made it onto the rescue ships. The rest had been lost when the final shield generators failed. Among the survivors were the governing council, scientists, artists, and a careful selection of their population designed to preserve their genetic diversity. On the surface of Haven, the first Vesperi emerged from their transport ships. Kirtal stood at the front of the group, crystal structures glowing with muted colors that humans had learned to recognize as both hope and grief. Susan Harris stood waiting to greet them, along with a team of human scientists and engineers who would help with the settlement process. Welcome to your new home, she said simply. Kirtal's crystals pulsed. You have given us life when death seemed certain. The Vesperi will never forget. The settlement process began immediately. Humans worked alongside Vesperi to establish the new colony. The plans had been detailed and thorough, but reality always differed from theory. Problems emerged within the first days. Dr. Kevin Powell, the chief medical officer for the settlement team, was the first to notice something wrong. The younger Vesperi were showing signs of distress, their crystal structures dulling and their movements becoming sluggish. Something's affecting their growth patterns, he reported during an emergency meeting. The radiation levels are correct, according to our measurements, but they're not thriving. Olivia studied the medical scans with growing concern. It's like they're not absorbing the energy properly. But why? We matched the frequencies exactly. For 3 days, the science team worked around the clock to identify the problem. More young Vesperi fell ill. The human-Vesperi relationship, so recently established, was being tested by its first crisis. Could it be the soil composition? Suggested Greg. On their homeworld, the crystal formations in their bodies resonated with similar formations in the ground. It was a breakthrough moment. Analysis confirmed that the mineral content of Haven's soil lacked specific elements that had been present on the Vesperi homeworld, elements that weren't in any of their scans or data. They never thought to tell us because it was so fundamental. To their world, they didn't realize it was important, Olivia explained to Eric and Susan. Like asking humans if they need nitrogen in their air. The solution would require a complete reworking of the settlement areas. Mineral compounds would need to be synthesized and introduced into the ecosystem, a massive undertaking given the size of the colony. How long will it take? Susan asked. Months at minimum, Olivia replied. And the young ones don't have months. The news spread quickly through both human and Vesperi communities. After coming so far, after sacrificing so much, they faced yet another challenge that threatened the survival of the refugee species. It was Amanda Collins, a human sound engineer who had been working on communication systems, who offered an unexpected insight. I've noticed something strange, she told Olivia. When I play certain musical frequencies near the young Vesperi, their crystals seem to respond, becoming brighter temporarily. This observation led to a series of experiments. The team discovered that specific sound frequencies could stimulate the Vesperi crystal structures in a way similar to the missing mineral resonance. It's not a permanent solution, Kevin cautioned, but it might buy us time while we fix the soil composition. Human musicians were quickly recruited to the effort. They worked with Vesperi elders to create compositions that contained the necessary frequencies. Soon, the settlement was filled with an otherworldly music, part human melody, part alien crystalline resonance. The effect was immediate. The young Vesperi began to recover, their crystal structures brightening and their energy returning. For many humans, this became a profound moment of connection. They couldn't breathe the same air as the Vesperi, couldn't touch them without protective gear, but through music, through vibration and harmony, they could literally give them life. Ben Ward, a cellist from Sydney, spent 12 hours each day playing for a group of Vesperi children. It's strange, he told Susan during a short break. I've played concerts all my life, but I've never felt music actually healing someone before. While the musicians maintained the health of the younger generation, the science teams worked to adjust the mineral composition of Haven's soil. Specialized manufacturing plants were constructed to create the needed compounds. Vesperi scientists, now understanding the problem, worked alongside humans to design a permanent solution. 6 weeks after the crisis began, the first test areas showed promise. Plants with crystal-like structures, similar to those that had grown on the Vesperi homeworld, began to emerge from the treated soil. It's working, Olivia said, her voice breaking with emotion as she held up a sample for the settlement council to see. The ecosystem is starting to self-sustain. News of the breakthrough spread across human space. The story of how music had saved an alien species captured the imagination of people throughout Earth's colonies. More volunteers requested assignment to Haven, bringing their instruments and their desire to help. One evening, as the gas giant rose large in Haven's sky, Susan found Kirtal watching a group of humans and Vesperi engaged in what could only be described as a jam session. The sounds they created together were unlike anything in human or Vesperi musical tradition, something genuinely new. We did not expect this, Kirtal said quietly. We hoped only for survival. We did not dream of creation. Susan smiled. That's the thing about bringing different people together. You never end up with just the sum of the parts. Around them, Haven continued to transform, not into a copy of the lost Vesperi homeworld but into something new. A world built by two species who had found each other across the stars at exactly the right moment. 5 years passed on Haven. What had begun as a desperate refugee settlement had grown into a thriving community. The crystal spires of the main Vesperi city now rose confidently toward the sky, glowing with inner light that pulsed in harmony with the settlement's rhythms. Alongside these alien structures stood human buildings, designed to allow both species to live and work together despite their fundamental biological differences. Paul Martinez stood on the observation platform of the Central Administrative Building, watching the sunrise. At 38, he had not planned to make Haven his permanent home. As a cultural liaison during the evacuation, he had expected to return to Earth once the crisis was over. But like many humans, he had found it impossible to leave. Still enjoying the view after all this time? Asked Kirtal, joining him on the platform. The Vesperi elders' crystal structures had regained much of their luster over the years. Now they shimmered with complex patterns that Paul had learned to read as expressions of contentment. It never gets old, Paul replied. 2 suns, the gas, giant. All those colors in the sky. Earth's single yellow sun seems boring by comparison. As co-governors of Haven, Paul and Kirtal met each morning to discuss colony business before the day began. Their partnership had become a model for human Vesperi cooperation throughout the settlement. The new Crystal Computing Center is ready for activation, Kirtal said. The human technicians have successfully integrated their systems with ours. This was significant news. For 5 years, scientists from both species had worked to combine Vesperi crystal technology with human computing systems. The potential benefits were enormous. Computers that operated at quantum speeds while using a fraction of the energy of traditional systems. The research team from Earth arrives today, Paul noted. I think they'll be impressed by what we've accomplished. Later that morning, Paul greeted the visitors from Earth. The research delegation was led by Olivia Mason, who had returned to Earth after the initial settlement crisis was resolved. Now she was back, eager to see how the colony had developed. This is incredible, she said as Paul guided the group through the main city. I hardly recognized the place. They passed a large open area where young Vesperi gathered around human musicians. The practice of using music to support Vesperi health had evolved into a rich cultural exchange. Human instruments had been modified to produce the specific frequencies that resonated with Vesperi physiology, while the aliens had developed new crystal formations that could translate their natural harmonics into sounds humans could appreciate. The school is our pride and joy, Paul explained, leading them to a remarkable building with sections designed for both species. Inside, human and Vesperi children learned side by side, each in their own protected environment but able to see and communicate with each other. We discovered something unexpected, Paul told Olivia. Vesperi young and human children learn from each other in ways we never anticipated. The Vesperi grasp mathematical concepts at an incredible speed, while our kids have a natural talent for creative problem-solving that amazes their teachers. As the tour continued, they visited the agricultural domes where earth plants grew alongside crystal formations that served the Vesperi's nutritional needs. The once barren moon now supported a complex ecosystem carefully designed to serve both species. We've had 3 successful harvests, Paul said proudly. Haven is almost self-sufficient now. That evening, a celebration was held to mark the 5th anniversary of the colony's founding. In an amphitheater designed with separate but connected sections for humans and Vesperi, both species gathered to commemorate what they had achieved together. Susan Harris, now an admiral, had returned for the occasion. Her hair had more gray now, but she stood tall as she addressed the crowd. 5 years ago, we faced what seemed impossible, she began. A dying world, an alien species in need, and no clear path to help them. The easy choice would have been to turn away, to focus on our own concerns. Many others made that choice. She looked across the gathering, meeting the eyes of both humans and the crystal facets of the Vesperi. But the right choice is rarely the easy one. By choosing to help, we not only saved the Vesperi, We discovered something about ourselves. We reaffirmed what humanity can be at its best. After the speeches, a special performance began. Human musicians and Vesperi crystal singers presented a composition created specifically for the anniversary. The music filled the amphitheater, vibrations that could be felt by both species despite their different sensory systems. As the final notes faded, a surprise visitor was announced. The Tellurian ambassador had arrived unscheduled, requesting permission to address the gathering. The tall, elegant alien approached the central platform. Unlike during previous diplomatic visits, she wore no protective gear, having adopted new technology developed on Haven that allowed different species to exist briefly in each other's environments. 5 years ago, my people made a calculation, she said, her translator converting her musical language. We determined that the resources required to save the Vesperi exceeded the reasonable commitment any species should make to another. The amphitheater was silent as she continued. We were wrong. Not in our calculations, those were correct. We were wrong in our understanding of what is reasonable. She turned to face the human section. You have shown us that compassion cannot be calculated, that the true measure of a civilization is not what it can gain, but what it can give. The impact of Haven had spread far beyond its boundaries. The successful integration of human and Vesperi technology had led to advances that benefited many worlds. More importantly, the example of cooperation had inspired other species to reconsider their approaches to interspecies relations. Later, that night as the celebration continued, Paul found himself standing with Kirtal once again on their favorite observation platform. The gas giant filled half the sky, its swirling colors illuminated by the light of twin stars. Did you ever imagine this? Paul asked. When your world was dying and you sent out those distress calls, did you imagine anything like what we've built here? Kirtal's crystals pulsed with colors that Paul had learned meant deep emotion. We hoped only for survival, the Vesperi said softly. We did not dare dream of flourishing, of partnership, of growth. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the moons of the gas giant trace their paths across the night sky. Tomorrow, the first Vesperi human scientific expedition leaves for the outer planets, Paul said. Another first. There will be many, more firsts, Kirtal replied. That is what happens when different minds work together. The possibilities multiply. Below them, the lights of the settlement glowed. Human electric lights and Vesperi crystal luminescence side by side, neither overwhelming the other, each contributing to a whole that was greater than its parts. In the distance, a new transport ship was landing, bringing more visitors and settlers from Earth. Word had spread about the opportunities on Haven, about the unique community being built there. More humans were coming not just to help but to learn, to grow, to be part of something unprecedented. We have a saying, Paul said as they watched the ship touch down. A crisis shows who we truly are. Kirtal's crystals shifted to a pattern of agreement. Then I am glad we found you during our crisis, and perhaps equally glad that you found us during yours. Paul looked questioningly at the Vesperi elder. You were a young species, uncertain of your place among the stars, Kirtal explained, searching for purpose. Perhaps in saving us you also found yourselves. As a new day dawned on Haven, both species continued their shared journey, different in almost every biological way, yet united by the choice made 5 years earlier, when every species had abandoned the Vesperi, but humans had chosen to protect.